Hey, you're listening to Angel Nears the podcast. Angel Nears is a Silicon Valley community for startup builders where founders and operators share their firsthand knowledge on how to build and scale startups. I'm your host, Oleg Kujakov, and our guest today is Sergio Aguirre, founder and CEO of EchoPixel, a software platform that enables physicians to use a digital twin of patients using standard medical images to create a 4D interactive hologram. I'm excited to bring Sergio on to talk about the developing technologies that transform delivery of patient care and that also enable precision health. Before we get into all that, Sergio, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Excited to have you, and I'm excited to learn a little bit more about you. So to get us started, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and just how you got started as an entrepreneur?
Sure. So I'm originally from Mexico, and I did my bachelor's and master's double E. And as a electrical engineer, I was graduating around the time of the internet boom, and seeing all these startups was very attractive. From my perspective, I thought I was going to start a company in my 30s, but I was compelled to start a company in my last year of my bachelor's by one of my professors. And I ran my first company as I did my master's down in Mexico. We were doing some things on 3D, and that's how I got started. In that company, we took a lot of lessons, and we were very successful. Had a lot of fun, and was very curious about the medical space and the applications of visualizing things in a 3D interactive environment. And that's what got me to EchoPixel.
Nice. So I don't want to assume people go to college at all ages. I kind of assume that you were younger than 30, right? So how old were you when you started your first company?
Oh gosh. So this was my last year of bachelor's. I think I was probably 22.
Oh man, yeah. So a little bit ahead of schedule if you were planning on starting a company when
Yes.
you were 30.
I thought about it a lot.
Yeah. So it's something you always wanted to do. Can you talk about jumping in the water a little early there?
Yeah, well, very quickly, right? I think as a kid, I had the blessing that, I was very exposed to the US, and I was seeing all these companies. I was also very close to California, and particularly to a town called San Diego, where you would see all this naval technology flying around in jets. So I was very attractive to technology. I was seeing people build companies, and also my father would invite me to his business meetings to translate for him. And so when I was going to college, I had a decision before myself whether I would go into business or engineering. And I told my father I was going to do the hard stuff, the engineering stuff, but business has its own challenges as well.
Yeah, get the hard stuff out of the way. Jumping in the water metaphor, I understand you spent some time as a swimmer. That takes a lot of time, focus, and energy out of your life. Can you talk about swimming? And are there any parallels between what you were doing as a swimmer and maybe what you're doing today as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, as a kid, I started swimming when I was very young. Competitively, I started swimming when I was 7 or 8. And it really is something that I love and enjoy. If there was one thing that I would like to do more is swim. But anyway, the lessons that I've taken out of competitive swimming, I got an opportunity to swim all the way through college. Is really, when you're a competitive swimmer, you're thinking about going to the Olympics. So these are, long term plans of 8 to 10 years. So that has been very helpful in how I think about things. I think about goals and what it takes on a year to year basis to get to them. And I think from my perspective, it's helped me reduce that fear factor of starting something because I can visualize steps to success in some way. And, when I was around that 22, when I was in my last year of bachelor's, I was contemplating taking some opportunities in large companies like Sony or Schlumberger that would recruit very heavily at my college, or starting a company. And I said, why not? It'll probably be successful when I'm in my 30s. And here I am now in my 40s.
Awesome. Well, you mentioned your company, and we kind of talked about what they do off top. I imagine you, as a founder, give this like elevator pitch all the time. But for us and the listeners, can you talk about maybe the problem you're trying to solve at EcoPixel, and talk about the solution as well?
Sure. So, what EcoPixel does is a software platform that allows physicians, really any doctor, to work with standard medical images. Think about a CT, an MRI, or an ultrasound, and experience that data as a hologram. So, usually, doctors are interpreting 2D images, even though a CT or an MRI is a 3D volume data set. And so, not every physician is trained to do that. In fact, only one type of physician, a radiologist, is trained to do that. So, anyway, the advantage of being able to experience a digital twin of a patient as a hologram is that it gives physicians a very easy understanding of the spatial relationships of anatomy or potential lesions or problems. And it just makes it very easy for them to be very, very good clinicians. In particular, this is very valuable for minimally invasive procedures. So think about surgeries where you're guiding precision instruments to a very precise location. All of that is guided by images. And, just so that you imagine, right? Our software allows you to have this holographic experience of a patient. So think about if you're in front of your laptop, think about that space between the laptop display and the keyboard. You double click on a patient name, and a patient's heart is going to be floating on top of that keyboard. You can move around the laptop and see around that heart and reach in and touch that heart. So that's what our software allows physicians to do. And so when they're doing this in a procedure, it helps them really understand where their tools are. It gives them this enhanced spatial awareness of their target and where their tools are, and it just gets them better outcomes.
Yeah, so this is like sounds so futuristic. It's like blowing my mind. But when you say hologram, I think of like maybe like Star Wars, and maybe like a projection. So you're saying these digital twins are being projected like into the air above where you're trying to work?
Yeah, so our software allows you to use these displays, and you don't need to wear a headset. You don't need to wear glasses. This is something that you see a patient's heart or somebody's brain floating in the air. It's not something that's projected, but our software allows us to control how light comes from the display and hits the user's eyes. So you really experience it as this hologram, pretty much like you would imagine it or see it in Star Wars. It's just a single user system.
Incredible. And I don't know if you already said this, but are you wearing any kind of glasses or a headset, or is it just projected? Or
When we started EcoPixel, we were anticipating a lot of these hardware devices. So I had a lot of ideas of hardware in terms of, the VR headsets or augmented reality headsets or even displays.
Mhm.
But in some of the initial research that I did, I saw some very interesting technology being done by large companies. And I said, I need to get on the software side because those devices won't become a clinical solution unless they have the right software. So our software can run on any of these devices, but from user feedback, we've ended up shipping devices that don't require any headgear or glasses. It's just this naked eye holographic experience that we enable today.
That's incredible. Can you talk about how it works a little bit more? I had a projector myself, and you're always projecting onto like a screen or something. But how do these holograms? How are they projected? Are they projected, and are they just projected into the air?
Well, you always experience things in 3D. And so your brain is accustomed of into processing the right sensory inputs that to give you this experience. So what our software does is drive these sensory inputs to your visual system. Obviously, there's a left and right image signal that we create. There's also something called motion parallax, which is essentially tracking your head position and orientation as well as your eye location and orientation. And that's probably as strong, if not a little bit stronger than the left and right eye perspective. So anyway, to keep it simple, what we're doing is we're creating an image that has a mixture of pixels that are being directed to each of the end user's eyes. So some pixels are directed to your left eye, some pixels are directed to your right eye, and it's done in a way that your brain recognizes it, and then your brain says, "Oh, this is floating at this location." And that location is something that we calculate specifically. We actually calculate that physical 3D space where you can see the data, and that's why it feels like this hologram, even though it's not being projected.
I mean, that sounds incredible. Thanks for breaking it down. I want to talk about some of these big terms and how they relate to healthcare. So, can you help me understand like what's the difference between AR, VR, MR, and then once we understand that, we can kind of talk about how these data visualizations can improve healthcare decision making.
Sure, I personally think a lot of these things are very heavy-handed in terms of marketing terms, but VR has traditionally been used to define when you have a headset that covers all of your visual system. So you only see your visual system is your visual field of view is completely enveloped by this headset. So it's fully immersive. Augmented reality, on the other hand, you're wearing some sort of hardware or eyeglasses that will allow you to overlay data on some images, or even some data overlaid on images that you're capturing through a phone, for instance. And then mixed reality is trying to match what you see in the real world with digital data. So, in that sense, what I was trying to explain of our software is very close to that definition of mixed reality. You have a way of understanding the 3D space of the real world that is visible, and you will overlay at a particular location something that is 3D or that you experience as 3D as digital data.
Hmm. I got it. So let's dive into to these one at a time. Let's start with virtual reality. It seems like putting on a headset might be kind of limiting. That is totally immersive. How can clinicians use virtual reality in a clinical setting today?
Yeah, I think virtual reality has done a great job at getting into some very good use cases. There's a lot of people doing training, and training in the medical field is a very complicated and very costly endeavor. So, virtual reality, you're basically creating these video games that allow medical students or sometimes professionals to rehearse and train on some techniques. The other application that I've seen be very successful in virtual reality is something for post traumatic stress disorder. So, people that have had very difficult experiences benefit from having let's say, a subdued or very controlled virtual environment that lets them confront those fears. And so those are the two use cases that we've seen with high success in virtual reality, and that are conducive to that isolative and fully enveloping immersion.
Right. So okay, so two kind of use cases. The first one's training, and the second would be somewhat limited, right? It's a special use case. It's almost like an edge case for people that have post traumatic stress disorders and could benefit by that all immersive experience. How about the next runner up? How does augmented reality fit? Is it a better fit when it comes to delivering patient care, or are we still not going to see that in medical offices?
Yeah, well, let me just emphasize a little bit, right? That post traumatic stress disorder use case, I think these are patients that have very significant challenges, and anything that can help them overcome it is very, very valuable, especially because you're talking about situations where you're helping a patient maybe not need drugs or very strong narcotics to control their trauma. So I think that one is a very nice use case that we personally like, and a very clear benefit to patients. I think on the augmented reality side, interestingly enough, this is a space that has been used very early on from medicine. Maybe not in the way that the tech community likes in terms of a head-mounted display or different things, but in neurosurgery and some other applications, there's a device called a surgical microscope. So think about a doctor looking down through some microscope device, and then they overlay some data through that microscope. Traditionally, this has been used in neurosurgery, and neurosurgeons are very, very happy with those surgical microscopes. So this has been around for many years, well before the term AR became popular. This had been in use for some time now.
But still, well, there's use cases. I guess the last one we want to talk about is mixed reality. Is it also have like a specific use case segment, or could this be used for wider purposes? What's your take?
Well, I think mixed reality. We've, I think the healthcare industry has arrived at the conclusion that there's a big opportunity in surgeries and minimally invasive procedures or therapies, because you need to be able to navigate a patient's body and deliver drugs or devices or some sort of energy as a therapy. So all of that is done traditionally with image guidance. That could be X-ray, it could be ultrasound, it could be all sorts of different modalities. The challenge there is that if you truly want to be precise about that delivery, you can do a lot of planning, but the planning changes very rapidly as you're going into the body of the patient. So that's a very strong need of mixed reality. The other thing is the patient's anatomy and body or organs are going to be moving. And so that again is a very important challenge. So there's a very big opportunity in mixed reality to be able to translate what a patient's organs or tissue is doing at a particular time in a minimally invasive procedure. And quite honestly, minimally invasive surgery is really a space that's about to grow dramatically. And there are different tools and different devices that just require a very different level of precision that what currently one would believe is available in ORs across the world. So that is what we've seen be the large opportunity here.
Yeah, so it sounds like each of these technologies, virtual reality, augmented reality, and mixed reality, all kind of have their own distinct differences and uses and potentially advantages. Do you think one has more opportunity when it comes to kind of changing the landscape of medicine, whether it be how we look at things digitally or how we deliver care? Is one of these more full of opportunity, or what's your take there?
Well, our conclusion is that mixed reality has a very big opportunity to impact healthcare, because just the drivers of the market are that higher dependence on minimally invasive procedures, right? So you're really relying on imaging to deliver a surgery or a therapy. The other thing is hospitals are going to become decentralized. So the ability to do these procedures remotely through some sort of telemedicine approach means that you need to be able to communicate that 3D information remotely, and mixed reality gives you that ability as well. And so there are a lot of there's a lot of potential impacts there. The other one is the ability for more physicians to be able to perform at a very high competency level is a very big opportunity. Right now, a lot of these minimally invasive procedures rely on physician experience, And that can be a challenge because these are great new approaches to deliver care, but adoption is really limited to a handful of centers where you have the expertise or the ability to build a very large team to support them. And so, what we found is that the vast majority of physicians are very, very good doctors, very good physicians, but many times we're asking physicians to solve multiple problems besides the clinical problem at hand. And so just imagine, right? Let me give you an example that we at EchoPixel are very familiar with. So we've decided to get into cardiac procedures. So the heart is a complex 3D structure by itself, but it's also constantly moving. The heart is beating. You have valves that are opening up and closing, and then the blood has to flow in a certain direction. So we like to say that you need to understand the three F's of cardiology: the form, function, and flow. If you want to imagine this, you can use your left hand and just make a fist and open up your hand dynamically. So let's say one time a second, and think that you have a little something is wrong in one of your fingers, and you'd like to put an instrument to one of those fingers very accurately as your hand is opening up and closing, and touch a particular point accurately so that you don't damage any neighboring tissue, which can be very dangerous. And so, as the heart is moving and you're doing this with 2D images, the thing or the structure, your target that you want to hit, is coming in and out of plane, and your tool is coming in and out of plane. And so it makes it very difficult. That doctor that spent a lot of years at school training is now essentially trying to solve a 3D problem from 2D images in a high stress environment. And he's not really focused that much on the actual clinical procedure. He's trying to just resolve this 3D problem, right? So when you give them the opportunity to see in 3D and despite the movement, see very clearly where that target is, where their tool is, that enhanced situational awareness allows them to better control their tools, better adapt on the fly to conditions that are changing, and very precisely drive their tools to deliver an implantable device or some therapy that they need to perform.
That sounds incredible. Can you help me understand like how you're creating these models? I know we mentioned on the top of the show they're generated from 2D images. EchoPixel lets physicians experience a digital twin as a 4D hologram. Can you talk about how you create that? I know we did mention it at the top, but can you talk maybe about generating this and how it's different from current 3D solutions?
Sure. So first, as the engineer in me, always kind of reacts to the word models. So we don't create models. Our software takes raw data, takes raw CT, raw MRI, raw ultrasound, and renders it in real time into this holographic experience. And so what that means is that you can see that in 3D. You'll see all that three-dimensional holographic experience, but the 4D is that if the data has movement, and you can achieve this with almost all types of medical images, you can describe that 4D time sequence of the heart beating very precisely. You could say usually they're defining 10 points across a heart cycle, so you can very accurately say this time point number 7 is systole of the heart cycle, which is a particular point of the heartbeat. And so that's what we mean by the 4D holographic experience, right? Now, on the other hand, we're taking advantage, and this is a little bit of a lesson of my experience of working in 3D for so long. There is a lot of technology out there to be able to do virtual reality, augmented reality, whatever you want, but there's not a lot of content, right? So if you Google VR and AR, you will see a lot of headlines that there's content, or this company's building this content. Again, the engineer in me is, I am very bad at art, and I'd like to say I'm artistically handicapped. So I don't do content. But what I liked about the medical space is that it is a space where there is already infinite content. Just to give you an example, right, in the US, there are 600 million imaging studies done per year, which at least half of them are 3D data sets by design, meaning the CT scanner, the MRI, or the ultrasound is capturing 3D information and is sitting on servers at hospitals, just not consumed in 3D, it's consumed in 2D. So you could go back 5 years and you have over 1 billion unique video games of content that you could give physicians to work on. So that's what drove me to medical. That was one of the strategic things that drove me to medical, was that here was infinite content to drive through these technologies. So the other thing, so we take advantage of that, right? And there's two things that we're doing there. For diagnostic imaging, all of that data is stored in something called DICOM, which is, to put it in layman's terms, the JPEG of medicine. So we read raw DICOM and we get that whole volume of data and put it through our software that's going to render it to give this holographic experience that you can interact with. For real-time image guidance, which is what we're doing now in a lot of ORs and cath labs, which are, the ORs where you're having a minimally invasive procedure, that takes live images, which is also 3D. Ultrasound right now is a very advanced technology, very mature, where you have all sorts of sensors that can give you very high resolution 4D data, meaning 3D volumes in a sequence that will allow you to describe, very, very accurately reconstruct the heart or the liver, or basically any kind of organ and tissue, and see it live. And so, what our software's been built around is to tap into all of these different types of images that are out there that are pretty much standard, bring them into an environment where we can present it to any physician and just let them be physicians, right? It's really gratifying to get a text message from one of the doctors that are using us and say, "Hey, I found that vessel. It helped us avoid injuring the airway of this patient," or something like that. So it's a very powerful tool that has a direct impact on patients and also on physicians that, quite honestly, spend a lot of time trying to make sure to do the best for their patients.
Yeah. So much to get to, and I kind of want to talk about how you got to this point. Let's start with the story. Like, how did you start your company? You mentioned it was back in 2012. Was it 2012?
Yeah, I was working on EchoPixel a couple of years before. 2012 was when we received our initial seed funding term sheet, and really got to work in January 2013 on this full time. But anyway, the first company I had was doing 3D. It was doing a lot more hardware. I was doing a little bit of software very, very basic software. Think about plug-in type stuff to facilitate marketing videos, sometimes training videos in 3D, a little bit of oil exploration, and something we did a lot of geography information systems. So this is a different market now where you take aerial photography, and a lot of people want to understand that terrain in 3D. But all of these markets would require very heavy lifting in just creating the content, and so I was frustrated by that, in the sense that there was some value, but it was always based on the content. And I did have an opportunity during that my first company to have an executive program at the University of Texas. They actually were collaborating down in Mexico with my university, and at that point, I was curious about an endoscope, an endoscopy device. Think about like a rod that has fiber optic channels on it that you can see through and you can record video, but doing it in 3D. At that point, I was very concerned about doing animal testing and being very naive about the FDA process. I said, I don't want to do that. But somebody introduced me to medical images in radiology, and it looked very similar to some experiences that we had had in the oil industry. And I said, oh, I could do that. So I started building a business plan around this and a vision, and kind of like said, this is going to take, it's a big idea, and I'm just going to go into it. And it's been really rewarding, I have to say. Definitely, it's taking that long term view of things in terms of changing the way that doctors work and use data that they're trained very rigorously to consume in 2D. And but it's been a great ride.
Yeah. Talk about your company today. Why is now the right timing for EchoPixel?
Well, number one, VR, AR, MR, these are terms that are now mature. So it's not, it's something that both patients but also doctors are expecting, that this is the type of care that they should be having. The other thing is that the image resolution and the image characteristics of the imaging that's being used in medicine has really become very high resolution. So that infinite content that I was talking about, it is real. It is out there, and you can get very, very exciting types of images. The other thing is minimally invasive therapies or procedures is really the future. I have to say, we were very surprised when we started getting into surgery to the type of still reliance of the majority of hospitals in the US and across the world in open surgery. And, the last time I checked, it is 2021. So I would expect in the future, most of things would be minimally invasive surgery. So that is the drive. And so those types of procedures, again, are really driven by imaging. And the instruments to deliver them very precisely are becoming 3D tools. So usually tools for surgery are very, I don't want to use the word rudimentary, but they're very simple tools. They're very kind of rigid objects. But to achieve precision, they're now changing to something that you can direct. They're controlled and you can direct in 3D. So there's a fundamental need to see and interact in 3D to be able to drive these instruments precisely and fulfill that precision health goal of these surgeries. And so we just see these elements coming together into the space that we've been pursuing.
Yeah, so along those lines of precision health, and you're saying the future is these minimally invasive surgeries. Talk about the value proposition. Is it improved probabilities when it comes to the non-invasive surgeries? Is it reduced costs? Is it all of the above? Am I missing something? Talk about the value prop.
Yeah, no, there's a tremendous value prop here. So number one, for the patient, if you, unless just focusing on cardiac surgery, the difference in an open heart cardiac surgery versus a minimally invasive therapy means that you might go home the same day or the next day versus staying in the hospital a week or two because they cracked open your chest. So that is a tremendous benefit to the patient. The trauma of really opening up your sternum is a very big challenge. And you want to, at the same time, one needs to realize the majority of patients that are having these cardiac procedures are very elderly patients, right? You're talking about at least 65 and older, but the majority are probably in their 70s. So minimally invasive therapies are definitely have a very strong patient benefit. From a health economic story standpoint, you're talking that the less time a patient is in a hospital, the less expense it is for that hospital, and thereby greater return. And so it's really just a higher value of that procedure. The challenge is being able to deliver on that precision health, right? So a lot of times you might have some complications where neighboring tissue or organs were damaged, and so instead of leaving on that day, you have a patient stay a week or maybe 3 days. So you're not really realizing yet the full benefits of this, and also the limited access of these therapies across the market. So there's a large benefit in terms of the patient experience, but also the optimized use of healthcare resources to manage and extend the life of these patients.
All right, next, let's look under the hood. I'd like you to describe the essence of your innovation. We've used a lot of terms, AR, VR, and what it sounds like what you're doing is mixed reality. Is there any, I know you kind of mentioned like a lot of those terms are kind of buzzwords and they come with a lot of baggage. Are there any kind of other technologies that you're using that you'd like to highlight, or if you want to dive into your tech stack, that'd be interesting too. How are you guys innovating, and what kind of technologies are you making use of?
Sure. I mean, so directly for our software, right? You want to think about our software as a bit of a different software architecture. Most software that's in the medical imaging space has been thought about to create one single high quality image. And so it's a very slow software stack. And what we've done is we've kind of created this hybrid architecture where you have at its core kind of like a video game engine to do very high speed rendering, but it does it in a way that it's tapped into this data stream of those medical formats that we're getting of raw data. And it's opened up so that you can adjust the rendering parameters so that, because a CT or an MRI or whatever medical imaging you have will just have that volume of data, that volume of the patient. So if you wanted to see the heart, you can turn on a filter that allows you to see the heart. If you want to see the lungs, you turn on a different filter and it'll show you the lungs. And then, so that's the second part of our technology stack. The third one is we have a very advanced quantification tool set that allows you to size and measure almost anything. From a simple line to a volume in 4D. And then right now we are in the process of extending this and connecting it to the network so you could share it remotely. And so think about some of these procedures happening remotely through our interface, or training people remotely through a lot by seeing what the expert does on a real case, which is really how physicians are trained right now. They basically are shadowing surgeons and watching what they do over their shoulder. And so that those are the things that we have on our stack going ahead. And obviously we've got some AI stuff there for improving image quality and just detecting some things that we've been developing as we get more data into the system here.
I mean, yeah, all those technologies sound incredible. And we'll start with this. Talk about how competitive the market is. You're doing so many innovative things. Are there other people that are? I mean, I'm sure there's competition, but what's your competition doing?
Yes, definitely there is competition, and I think it's great. If we've always seen competition as a validator of the market. And I like to joke that you can't be a market leader, at least if there's no competition. So you need at least another horse to win. So in that sense, what we see in the market is different groups have taken a slightly different approach, right? Some groups have been very enamored with the hardware that's out there. So you have some companies that are very enamored with, say, a HoloLens, and they will make some technical choices that will make it difficult to get some medical data into the HoloLens, in the sense that you might have to create a model, and that just delays the ability to be able to get to a procedure or get to a surgery. There are other competitors that are taking have come at the problem from the hardware perspective, in the sense that they have a unique device of hardware that they believe is the right solution. Like I said before, we saw this as the software is really the enabler, and our software has been designed to be able to very quickly be able to run on any device. Quite honestly, like I said, we ship right now with these devices that are these flat panel screens that we can control through our software to give you this experience. But we are very open to collaborate with and we collaborate with different hardware manufacturers, and we're believers in this space where the headsets will become glasses and most likely contact lenses in some time. And so for us, it's really about which is the software solution that's going to exist within those devices that will better impact patients' lives, and that's the winning formula in the medical device space.
Yeah. How many years until augmented reality contact lenses?
Well, there are some companies working on that, and very early, but they are out there. I don't know. I'd hate to put a number on that, but it'll happen. It'll happen in my lifetime. So I like to sometimes say when whenever I need a heart procedure, my expectation is that I will walk into a hospital and a nurse will greet me with a tablet and will say, "Mr. Sergio, you are here for your heart procedure. Here is your plan." And I will see on that tablet a hologram with my heart and maybe the plan of the surgery. I will approve it on that tablet like device. They will hand that device to the surgeon that's going to do my procedure, and he will use that tablet like device that will give him this hologram and do the procedure through it. Take a picture of that, and then I will wake up in the recovery room and they will show me the outcome of my surgery as a hologram. And I would expect no leaks and a perfect implant and I will approve it. So these things will happen sooner than we expect. I think the realities of the market are one where patients are much more want to be much more informed and in charge of their decisions. And right now, if we've been in situations where even explaining to family members a procedure that a child will have is still sometimes done on pen and paper. And so that many times has nothing to do with the actual patient that's going to have the surgery. And so software solutions like ours can really improve that understanding and consent of the family members and the patient themselves, but also the patient satisfaction. And a lot of times after you have a surgery, you need to follow up with some recovery therapies. So, really understanding the outcome of your surgery and why you need to comply with that has a significant impact when you can communicate so clearly with patients. So, to get to that point, you really have to enable that precision medicine at the surgery level. You need to make sure that the data flow across the hospital happens in that platform and environment, and that's really our vision here is to drive it towards that endpoint.
It's a really an amazing picture you paint, and thank you for sharing. I'm glad we got that on record. If that's what I'm going to be expecting, and I'm gonna have to hunt you down if in my lifetime I don't see it. So I know you've put a lot of effort into building your team at Echo Pixel. Can you talk about what's involved there and how you put together your team? Includes industry leading PhDs, postdocs in computer science, physics, biochemistry, and electrical engineering, and a lot of industry experts. Can you talk about building that team and why it's important to your success?
Yeah, definitely. I think for Echo Pixel, we've been very blessed with the team that we've been able to put together. The medical space is a very interesting space in the sense that it is an industry that relies on collaboration. And so you need to have that physician input that is telling you what they need and what the patients need. You need to have that deep engineering expertise to be able to drive the technology. But if you're only driving the technology without the clinical guidance, it usually doesn't go the way that it should. And then you've got the regulatory standpoint where you need to make or try and make very long term decisions in terms of design so that you don't have to go to the FDA or the regulatory bodies every time that you have to that you make a change. And so building this multidisciplinary team has been again really rewarding of this market. And I see that. I mean, I'm a double E, right? But really, we're looking for bioengineering people which are looking for or have usually have a combination of experience. They'll have computer science, they'll have electrical engineering. Some of them will be from the mechanical engineering background. And then some of them will go into the regulatory space, which is the regulations that you need to meet to be able to be FDA approved. And so it's a space where you have to have this combination of expertise and make very informed decisions that are driving the company in a long term direction. Obviously, you're still a startup, so you want to, or we've strived to be able to be very agile and flexible. And I would say I pride myself in that EcoPixel has been able to do that. We've been very, very agile in some of these things, and that's been very, very exciting for us. But yeah, that's really just the nature of the industry that we're in. If you don't have that depth of expertise, but also the breadth in terms of the multidisciplinary aspect, you're going to be lacking for the market that we're in.
Great answer. Thanks for sharing. Let's wrap this up with kind of a big picture question. Sergio, you're a founder who's sort of shown a lot of grit and perseverance over many years, pivoting your company many times. Can you talk about how you've managed to reinvent yourself time and time again? How do you do it, and what are some of the challenges?
Well, number one, we've been supported by our investors through this process. So really, this experience would not have happened without that support. On the other hand, we've also been blessed with having very strong mentors that we've had the opportunity to learn from. But I think at the end of the day, you really need to believe in this, and we really believe that this is a solution that has a place in the market, and we've been working with physicians to make that happen. Most recently, our team with some physicians in Minnesota have done for the first time some of these minimally invasive therapies or surgeries using this holographic experience in the world, and that's very exciting. We get to push the envelope both from the technology side, but also from the clinical impact side. And when you're doing these things, you get to even meet the patients. So as a founder, right, I've had that a tremendous opportunity to see the company from basically every point of view, be it the code, the quality system, and the regulatory documents that I sign off on, but also many times meeting the patients firsthand and the doctor saying, "This is the guy that did that tool." And so it is a very humbling experience. And I'll tell you a quick story. One of our supporters, we were a company that graduated from the Fogarty Institute, which is a medical device accelerator founded by Dr. Thomas Fogarty. He's a very famous doctor and inventor. He was an inventor of some of the balloon catheters some time ago. But when we were at the Fogarty Institute, just about the time that we got our first FDA clearance, he turned 80 and there was a big party for him. And so obviously we were invited to the party. And in that party, there was a very nice presentation about his life and about how his catheters have been used in 20 million patients. Some of those patients were at the party. So, again, naive engineer, very proud of just getting my product through the FDA. and we were in the first discussions of getting it into use in some hospitals, all of a sudden that realization that our code was going to be making some actual decisions on patients became very, very tangible. And so it's something that we take very seriously, and again, very rewarding, because we've been fortunate to really impact patients' lives in terms of some of the congenital programs. Congenital heart defects tend to be very young patients. We've had experiences where physicians have told us that the use of our software has helped extend the life of patients between 20 or 30 years. Or now that we're doing more adult procedures where, the quality of life of these patients is really, again, allowing them to have a good time in retirement or with their families. And so that's also, it's a very different space than when you're selling an app, and that really has been probably what has allowed us to understand how to maneuver and how to be able to maintain the discipline to keep the technology growing and keep the business growing in terms of value to get to where we are.
That's some incredible work and a lovely story. Thank you for sharing. Before we get out of here, for the listeners who want to reach you and maybe learn more about EchoPixel, what's the best way to do that? Twitter, LinkedIn?
Yeah, so definitely our webpage, echopixeltech.com. And there is a Twitter page that is echopixel_Inc. We have a LinkedIn page, which is echopixel. And there's an Instagram page, which is echopixel_Inc. And even a Facebook account, which is echopixeltech. But all of those links are on our webpage, echopixeltech.com.
Fantastic. So the listeners who are intrigued, you have a few areas to follow EchoPixel, and we'll keep getting those updates there. We're going to end the show there. If you liked it, please subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and leave us a rating. Sergio, thanks for joining the show. We appreciate your time today and would love to have you back on at some point in the future.
Sure. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.